Well, good evening. Again, we'll pick up where we left off in Genesis chapter 30. We'll start back a little bit in verse 35 and endeavor to make our way through chapter 32, verse 2 tonight. So let's pray and we'll pick up where we left off. Our Father, thank you for the opportunity that we have to gather together, such as we do, and to have the opportunity to look at your word and to look at the lives of those that have come before us and the way that you have displayed your character and the way that you've worked in their lives so that we might have an understanding of the way that you might work in our life and your character in the way that you would deal with us. Lord, as we examine the life of Jacob and also Laban and their offspring, I pray that you would minister to us those things that are necessary for us. I ask it in Jesus' name. So, picking up in 35, we'll just kind of read through to the end of chapter 30 first, and then pick back up after that. But chapter 30, verse 35 says, So he removed that day the male goats that were speckled and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had some white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and gave them into the hand of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob, and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar, and of the almond and chestnut trees, peeled white strips in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And the rods which he had peeled he set before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. Now the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, spotted. Then Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the streaked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and did not put them with Laban's flock. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were feeble, he did not put them in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man became exceedingly prosperous, and had large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. In this section, we start to, or I guess we conclude, looking at Jacob's compensation for serving Laban. Remember in the previous chapter, he had posed this not so subtle, insinuating kind of question. So, for what are you going to serve me? Like you shouldn't serve me for nothing. So what are you going to do for work for me? How are you going to improve my standing here? And remember that initially he had served for Rachel, and then Laban swindled Jacob, replacing the daughters and giving the first, and then saying, well, if you just fulfill the week for Leah, then we'll give you, Rachel as well. So essentially causing Jacob to become a bigamist because the woman that he really wanted to be married to was the one who was offered to him second. Now, after that, that ended up taking, 7 years per bride, so that was 14 years of service. Then Laban really doesn't want to lose Jacob's service, so he says, well, what else can I give you that will make you stick around? Because it seems like I'm being blessed because you're here. And Jacob's like, well, it's about high time for me to put something together for my own family. I have sons now, and for my wives. So how about this? How about we go through and I'm not going to ask you for anything that you already have. I just want the speckled and spotted sheep, the brown lambs, the spotted and speckled goats, and that's it. Um, Apparently, these colors were very rare. The majority of the cattle in that part of the world were either white or black. They were solid colors. So seemingly in Canaan, the ones that had these kinds of coats were valued, but for the majority of people, they really didn't. It wasn't a big deal, but it was rare. So Laban thought, if that's all you're working for, and that's the minority of the coats that these goats or these sheep will have, then I'm making out like a bandit. Kind of like if you said, well, I'll work on your lobster boat, but I'm only going to take the ones with the blue shell. as, a, as a captain of a lobster boat, you'd be like, absolutely. Yep. Work for every one of them that has a blue shell. Or even if it, like those green with black stripes or spots. If they said that, like if you didn't have any kind of like, hey, I don't know if you know this or not, but that's pretty rare. So you're not going to be getting your money's worth. Laban was like, great. Yeah, no, absolutely. All the ones that are streaked and speckled, have those ones. So we have from 37 on. Oh, and after they make this bargain, last week I was talking about how it seemed like it might be Jacob's sons that took these ones from the flock and put them aside. In studying a little further, it seems probably more likely that it's Laban's sons, and that this is done as a way to make sure that Jacob is not going to cheat them. This 37 on, we don't really know why, and commentators don't really know why this worked. There are a lot of theories as to why this worked for Jacob. The only thing that we really ultimately know is that later on, the Lord said, "This is something I did." Um, some of the theories as to why this worked the way that it did, Jacob taking and peeling these sticks, these particular kinds of sticks, putting them in the trough, and then that the offspring would have the patterns on their coats. J.G. Murphy, in his commentary, he said that some people have said females may be influenced by the sight of the peeled rods. Um, he said that the sheep in the east lamb twice a year, and it is supposed that the lambs dropped in autumn are stronger than those dropped in the spring. He also claims that it's probable that he experimented with the healthy sheep regardless of the season. So, um, what does it mean that when the healthy ones came, then he put the rods in, and then when the weaker ones came, then he didn't put the rods in? Was it, like the time of year that he was doing that? Because obviously, sheep that have been impregnated and have gone through the summer will probably have more access to food than ones that have gone through the winter. So uh, those are theories as to what does it mean stronger, what does it mean the peeled rods. Dr. Henry Morris, in the Genesis record, proposed essentially that there might have been an epigenetic switch that was flipped when the chemicals from the branches were placed in the water. So epigenetics being that there are things that can happen with our genetics that will cause minor changes to ourselves. It's kind of a theory, not a major change, like tremendous shift within kind. But what is it that causes somebody to be, um, gluten sensitive? It could be something that's more of an epigenetic thing. Like you may be, someone at random may have a gluten sensitivity, whereas the rest of the family doesn't have a gluten sensitivity. So it's not purely a genetic. There's a genetic possibility, but it's not as though you're always destined to have kids with gluten sensitivities or other kinds of things. But there may be things that could trigger what's latent. So potentially that the chemicals in those rods reacted with the genetics of the pregnant animals to result in the coats the way that they were. That's another theory. Another one is that the chemicals didn't affect the way that they were, the coloration, but that the chemicals from the rods had aphrodisiac properties for the sheep and the goats. And so it caused them to reproduce. So, irrespective of, um, like causing any kind of change to the coat, what he really was trying to do is selectively breed the stronger sheep and goats as opposed to the weaker. And they happen to have the right kind of coat. Also, Henry Morris theorizes another kind of meaning to this may be that the sight of these rods may have stimulated a physical response in these cattle, much in the same way that we would have a visceral response to bloodshed. For example, if you walked in on something like that, or there are other things that you may see that you end up having a physical response to, that perhaps the sight of these particular rods did something with these sheep. I'll, again, a lot of this is really conjecture. It's just theory. There's nothing that is definitive from this. However, we know that this is something that the Lord ultimately worked together for Jacob. So, why it worked, those may be reasons, maybe not. But when we look at verse, the end of 30, we see the end of it was the flocks that were feeble, he didn't put them in, so the feebler were Laban's, the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man, Jacob, became exceedingly prosperous and was able to, diversify beyond having the sheep and the goats to having female and male servants and camels and donkeys. Now, chapter 31, we'll get into that. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has acquired all his wealth. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, Return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent, called Rachel and Leah to the field, to his flock, and said to them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not favorable toward me as before, but the God of my father has been with me. And you know that with all my might I have served your father, yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not allow him to hurt me. If he said thus, The speckled shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. And if he said thus, The streaked shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. So what's happening here is that the season of life, the season for Jacob to be among Laban and his family, obviously has ended. He can tell because of the kind of the gossip that's going around. He could tell because of the countenance of Laban that this is not going to be a good place for him to be able to stay. And the Lord confirms it by appearing to him and saying, Return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. What does Jacob do then? Well, he makes his case to Laban's daughters and tells them what he has heard from the Lord. The thing that's interesting in reading this is he's not commanding his wives. He is making a case before his wives. And then to see their response also is telling. So he says, going into more this chapter, or verse 10 through 13, why he chose to do what he did with the rods and all these things, why it was working out. He says, and it happened at the time when the flocks conceived that I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here I am. And he said, Lift your eyes now and see, all the rams which leap upon the flocks are streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar, and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. So Jacob is laying out for his wives, who undoubtedly see the same things, see the same signs, see his unwelcomeness within the family, see the envy growing because of the prosperity of Jacob. And then he says, and this, on top of all of that, is what the Lord has said to me. So, verse 14, then, and we'll go to verse 16. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, Is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and also completely consumed our money. For all these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it. As far as Laban is concerned, it's kind of a shame that his daughters, the mothers of his grandsons, are like, yep, dad is a total loser. Everything that you're reading, everything that you're seeing from this, you're right. And if God has said it's time for us to move, then we should move. Kind of a shame that it has to come to this with Laban. However, one of the things that is important is there is agreement in the household. There does seem to be this consensus of, yes, this is the way that the Lord is moving. Many people would like to paint Christianity as something that is so patriarchal so that the women do not have any kind of input whatsoever. But I think we've seen the importance of women as we're going through the book of Genesis. It's not demeaning toward them. It's not devaluing toward them. And even though Rachel and Leah are in a bigamist relationship, which is not the according to the design of God, even in that, even finding themselves in that kind of relationship, it wasn't purely for Jacob to serve himself. Um, he was working with his circumstances to marry the one woman that he had wanted to marry. But you can see his heart is not completely shut off to Leah as well. Imperfect guy, imperfect circumstances, as we were talking about last week. Rachel and Leah say, We haven't done anything wrong. Our dad's the one who's been underhanded. And I think that is, especially as a father, to understand the place that a father should have with a daughter, to have daughters get to that point with their father is a really shameful thing. Like that is a really, if it's for righteousness, if you are walking the line and your kids do not want to follow you in the faith, Scripture certainly says there's going to be division that comes because of the faith. But if it's because you have been so underhanded in your dealing with your kids that you have shut their hearts off from you in this way, that's a shame for Laban. We're going to see that that's, like as much as he does value himself and his riches, he does have a, like an attachment to his daughters as we move forward. But What a sad thing. They're not fighting in any way. They're not like, well, that's not so bad. They're like, yeah, he totally, you know, and beyond all this stuff that you have, it really, God has taken it from him to give it to us because it really should have been ours in the first place by right and by inheritance. And they see the way that he works for their father and the way that he's treated. Then Jacob rose and set his sons and his wives on camels, and he carried away all his livestock and all his possessions which he had gained, his acquired livestock, which he had gained in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob stole away unknown to Laban the Syrian, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. So he fled with all that he had. He arose and crossed the river and headed toward the mountains of Gilead. And Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Then he took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said to him, be careful that you speak to Jacob, neither good nor bad. So Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountains of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done? You have stolen away unknown to me and carried away my daughters like captives taken with a sword. Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, timbrel and harp. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly in so doing. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your fathers spoke to me last night, saying, be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. Why did you steal my gods? So we'll take some time on these verses here. After the agreement in the household, we have a discreet departure of Jacob and his household. Obviously, they knew there was going to be conflict. And so, seeking to avoid it, they left at a time when Laban was otherwise occupied. So, this particular time of the shearing of the sheep. And when they leave, though, Rachel ends up taking these household idols. We'll have more on that as we get to the end of this chapter. Suffice it to say, for somebody who, remember, Isaac had originally sent Jacob back here because of the cultural similarities, theoretically, between his family and Rebecca's family. It's surprising somewhat. Although we remember Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldees, seemingly idolatry was rampant there. False worship was rampant there, so that God called him out of Ur of the Chaldees. Nevertheless, you have these household idols, and Rachel thinks, well, if I'm going to leave, not only are we leaving with the flocks, but I'm taking something else to remind me of home. Scripture doesn't really tell us why Rachel took these. It doesn't say that she thought she was going to gain divine favor by doing it. Doesn't exactly say that she did it to rip off her dad either, although I probably am more in that camp, depending on the composition of these idols. Some may have been made of wood, others may have been made of metal. But suffice it to say, she steals them, and she does it unbeknownst to Jacob, unbeknownst to anyone. And this is really the thing that provokes Laban to pursue after them. I don't really think that he so much pursues on behalf of his daughters and his grandsons. I think he probably pursues more for these idols. Which reminds me of Psalm 115. What good is an idol? It can be stolen. It might have features that seem like it could be personal. It could do something for you, but they never move. They never talk. They never listen. They never act. And so uh, Laban has invested his confidence in the presence of these household idols But idols are able to be stolen, and these ones are no exception. They're stolen away. What kind of God are you serving if it can be stolen? Well, what are the gods that we serve sometimes as a society? The God of athletics. How long does that last? Whether it's as a spectator, the dream of your team winning a championship. And then as soon as they do, well, that's over. Time to try to be the champion again next year. The dream of, you know, some kind of career. You can work at a career for decades, but as soon as you retire, you're no longer in that career. So you can point to what it was, but if you had served that career as your God, what good does it do you in the long run? You can make an idol out of your family, out of your kids, and pretty soon they're going to grow up, and then when they move out, then what happens? There are a lot of things that we can, in our day and age, put before the Lord, and those things are all transitory. Those things don't necessarily stick with you. So the same kind of thing here. He has these literal idols, and it's interesting to talk with our brothers in India who are in a culture where they still worship idols because it seems so foreign to us. However, the spirit of the things that they're worshiping, the point behind everything that they're worshiping, are in essence no different from many of the things that we in the Western world also worship. If it's victory, if it's power, if it's prestige, if it's wealth, whatever it may be, whatever you think that it's going to unlock for you, that's why you're serving it. So these other things we may be serving thinking we're going to find fulfillment in them, but ultimately fulfillment comes from what cannot be taken. What doesn't go away, what doesn't change with the seasons. Remember, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. There's nobody that can take you from the Father's hand, right? That this is far better to commit ourselves to the Lord than to commit ourselves to things that are eventually going to come to an end. But Laban, this is what he's chasing after. This is the thing that he is most concerned with. It says that Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Now remember, Laban and his sons had moved Jacob's flock 3 days away. So by the time Jacob has moved out, the sons that are there keeping the flocks are coming back to where Laban lives. And the news takes 3 days to get to him because of his initial distrust of Jacob. Kind of interesting. Then he pursues him for 7 days. Takes a lot of time. Overtakes him in the mountains of Gilead. And God comes and intervenes as he's coming with his full force and fury about the Jacob taking away what he thinks belongs to him. God steps in and he intervenes, and he says, you need to be careful. Be careful about what you're going to say to this guy. This guy has a special place in my plan. He has a special place in my heart. Interesting, though, that he says that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. So, just be neutral in the way that you talk with Jacob. I think the Lord, in a way, is saying, fine that you air your grievance, but I don't want you to be harsh with him, but I don't want you also to be kind of congratulatory or, over the top, trying to curry favor with him. Speak with him neither good nor bad. Yeah, he's taken off. He was afraid, and so he took off. That's not commendable. But also, don't try to, kiss up to him as if somehow that's going to gain you some kind of favor with me. Speak to him neither good nor bad. When Laban overtook Jacob, Jacob had pitched his tent, obviously with the women, children, and flocks, as we're going to see later on when he meets with Esau, there's only a particular pace that he can keep. So the Lord has stepped in and done enough to protect Jacob from the fury of Laban. And then we see in verses 25 through 32, let's see, we'll start in 26. Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You have stolen away unknown to me and carried away my daughters like captives taken with a sword. Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrel and harp." Knowing Laban the way that we do, how likely is it that he's going to be like, "Oh, let's celebrate. You're leaving. Wow, how nice." He's probably going to try to swindle him into staying for another 6 or 7 years. That was unintentional, kids. Uh, so, you know, he might have made him stay for longer. But he's saying, "And you didn't allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters." That's really what I care about here. Now you've done foolishly in so doing. It's in my power to do you harm. And now he says, this is what God said to me. "But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house, but why did you steal my gods?'" And this really gets to the heart of why Laban is chasing him. Like, I understand you want to get home, but why did you steal my gods? Then Jacob answered and said to Laban, "Because I was afraid, for I said, 'Perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force.'" The big thing that Laban's asking for, Jacob doesn't respond to immediately. And I kind of read this as Jacob thinks that he knows how Laban is, like what he's upset about, and he's going to answer that. And I think he's somewhat taken a little bit by surprise with the fact that he's talking about his gods and not his daughters. Like, why did you take away? I would have thrown you a feast, but why did you take away my gods? Um, and Jacob then, incidentally, too, I thought you were going to take your daughters from me by force. With whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. In the presence of our brethren, identify what I have of yours and take it with you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So he's like, whatever. I mean, I so did not care about these idols. Like the fact that they were stolen from you. If you want to kill a person who has them in their possession, it is so much not a thing that I have done or approved of that you can just kill them. Be really careful, brothers and sisters, with the things that you say. Be really careful with the agreements that you enter into or the oaths that you swear, like this. Because what would have happened if Laban would have discovered Rachel was the one who had stolen them at this time? Who knows? Laban's pretty vindictive at this point. He's pretty upset at this point. Would he have killed her just to make that point? What would that have done to Jacob's heart? What would that have done to his, prospect of having more children through Rachel? The whole tribe of Benjamin is at stake right here in this moment because Jacob said, "Yeah, just kill him." I don't know who did it. I'm sure he probably thought it was one of the male or female servants. I can't really believe that he would think that it would be his own precious, beloved wife, Rachel. Otherwise, he never would have put her in this kind of peril. He would have coughed up the idols if he would have known. Here, I didn't even want them anyway. She has endangered herself by what she did in secret. She has endangered her family as well. For Joseph to grow up without a mother, that wouldn't do either. So she is like running a huge risk here. But Jacob also, in the way that he's saying, okay, this is how we're going to deal with it, he is also unwittingly putting his family in tremendous danger, putting them at the mercy of Laban. And Laban Laban went into Jacob's tent and Leah's tent and into the two maids' tents, but he did not find them. And then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols, put them in the camel's saddle, and sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, "Oh, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me." And he searched but did not find the household idols. So she uses, uh, like obviously she uses the manner of women, as she would say, as her ability to protect herself from revealing what she's actually done. Kind of a crazy thing. She continues to deceive at this point. She doesn't come clean. She doesn't say, "Well, I'm really angry with you, Dad. That's the reason I did this," or "I felt like you've ripped us off for these 20 years, and that's why I did this." No real conversation with her father, just covering it up. Sorry, I can't stand for you. I would. I love you. I respect you. Maybe the halo effect is happening here, where because she has a physical beauty, people are willing to believe her. Who knows? But he passes on, and he comes up empty in trying to find these household idols. Verse 36 through 42. Then, now here is another change. Then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban, and Jacob answered and said to Laban, "What is my trespass? What is my sin that you have so hotly pursued me? Although you've searched all my things, uh, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us both. These 20 years I've been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it. Like you required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There it was. In the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your two daughters, and 6 years for your flock. And you've changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac, had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night." So here, Jacob's kind of venting about, "Oh, yeah, you come in here, you come in hot to my camp here with my wives and with my children, and you act like I have done something to you, and you can't produce what you are claiming. You come in here with some pretty serious allegations and threats, and they're completely unsubstantiated. Consider the humility that Jacob needs to, or the restraint anyway, that Jacob needs to have in order to allow his father in law, who is accusing him of theft, to go through every last bit of his camp. That's probably, like, especially as Americans, you got a warrant and go on your way. Uh, and yet he submits himself to go ahead, search anywhere you. I am so confident that these idols are not here. Search every square inch. I dare you. So after that's done, then it's his time to be upset. What are you? Who do you think you are coming in here like this? I haven't done anything to you. If anything, you have tried to take advantage of me at every turn. You've even changed the terms of our agreement for 6 years. With these flocks, you said initially we had an agreement, and then you changed the agreement because you saw that this one particular coat was predominant. Then you changed the arrangements to something else that's rare. And then that one started to be more predominant. And then you changed the terms of our agreement, And then, we went to something else that was rare, and you try to change it 10 times over the course of these 20 years that I've been trying to serve you. But God's the one who stood up for me in the same way that God was the one who advocated for him before he even entered Jacob's camp. God's the one who has rewarded me. God is the one who stood up for me. Because at this point, you would have just kept my sons, you would have kept my daughters, you would have kept my wives, you would have kept all your flocks if God hadn't stood up for me. And I'll tell you, God is the best advocate you can ever ask for. When it comes to some of these interpersonal strife and disputes, he has a way of protecting his own that you cannot rival with your own rage. You, with your own fury, with your own cunning, you cannot stand up for yourself as effectively as he can for you. So Jacob's been angry for a while here. He's like, you don't know the kind of environment that I had to serve you in. You don't know the way that the weather was, how hot it was during the day, how cold it was during the night, the sleeplessness because there were people trying to steal from you, and you wouldn't, just write it off as an insurance loss. I had to come good for anything that wasn't in order when you took an account of your flocks, and I did that. Uh, so, like, God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and he rebuked you. I don't even need to. Laban, being who Laban is not going to let this stand. That's not the final word. Jacob, there, God has delivered this back on you. Laban answered and said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters. These children are my children. And this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. So I'm not just looking at idols that you've stolen. I'm not just looking for that, but literally you've stolen everything you have from me. And this is his perspective. Not right. I mean, he's married to these daughters. He's created these children with these daughters. He entered into fair terms for this flock. But from Laban's perspective, you are walking away with all of these things, and all of them come from me. You would have nothing if it wasn't from me. So, going into verses 44 through 54. Now therefore come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap. And they ate there on the heap. Laban called it Jagar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galid. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore its name was called Galiad. Also Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob, here is the heap, and here is this pillar, which I have placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and the God of their father, judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain, and called his brethren to eat bread. And they ate bread and stayed all night on the mountain. And early in the morning Laban arose and kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. So that's as far as we're going to get tonight, but let's look at this last part, the uneasy peace treaty. So uh, Laban has said, "Everything you have, you stole from me, and I'm not going to abide that anymore. So if I see you anywhere in my country whatsoever, and I perceive that you are doing anything with malintent for thievery or for violence, then, like that's it. We're at war. And similarly, I will not come beyond this heap to you." Just this uh, uneasy peace, this codified division between the family. Interesting as well that in saying this, the Galid or Galiad, um, so the Jigar Sahadutha means heap of witness in Aramaic, and Galiad also means heap of witness, but in Hebrew. And then, let's see, in verse 49, Mizpah means watch. And the Lord says, he says, "May the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from another." And you may take that to be some kind of romantic imagery. Oh, yes, we're not always going to be amongst each other, so may God bless you. Well, that's not what Laban was saying. Like, you know what? God needs to keep his eye on you because you're shady. That's what this is right here. Mizpah's not a good thing. Mizpah is like, I don't trust you as far as I can throw you, and there's a God who knows everything, and there's a God who sees everything, and may he repay you for everything that you're doing that I can't repay you for. So if you're going to double deal on my daughters, on my family, may God be a witness between you and me. So interesting as well, as they are swearing this oath, this treaty, Laban swears by the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, and the God of their father. So this is going backwards, right? Abraham, his father, and the fathers before that. Remember, Abraham was called out of Ur of the Chaldees. Abraham was the one that was called into relationship with the one true God. It seems as though mankind up to this point, somewhere after Shem, had abandoned the one true God and had departed into idolatry. And so he who possesses these household idols is calling back. Whereas you have Jacob who swears by the fear of Isaac, the fear of his father Isaac. So he's moving forward from Abraham's experience into Isaac's experience with the Lord. And kind of interesting as well that he doesn't say the God of Bethel. He doesn't talk about his own experience at this point, because I wonder the intensity, or I wonder the level of trust that he has with God at this point. And I think that's part of the reason why it's important. We have 32 verses 1 and 2 right here immediately after Laban, he kisses his sons and daughters, so his obviously grandsons, his daughters, his granddaughters, and he blesses them, and as a father-in-law is wont to do for his grandkids and for his daughters. And then he departed and returned to his place. We have in verses 1 and 2 that Jacob now has passed out of Laban's household and into God's camp. He has been faithful to what Jacob had sworn back in Genesis 28, verses 20 through 22. I'll remind you, then Jacob made a vow saying, "If God will be with me and keep me in this way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set as a pillar, shall be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. So I think the reason that this 32, 1 and 2 is where it is in particular in the record is God has been faithful to that vow that was sworn. And um, what a blessed thing it is if you have gone through a season of uncertainty, then to be refreshed in the presence of the Lord. Can you imagine this kind of vision for Jacob? You know, did anyone other than Jacob see the angels of God? I don't know. Rachel and Leah and all of the patriarchs may well have seen the angels of God. It says angels. So this obviously is multiple angels, more than one. And as we know, angels are a fearsome sight. Every time somebody sees an angel, they're tempted to just fall down and almost die of fright. So to come into this place where there is a host of angels, or at least multiple angels, that's got to be an incredible thing to see. So as much as Jacob has gone through less than ideal circumstances to get him to this point, he's back in the promised land. He's with the children that ultimately the Lord is going to use, and even the children that he's going to use to ultimately bring the Messiah, the promised Messiah, to the world. So here we are. This is God's camp. We're back in the land that God has given us, that God has promised to us. Things are right again. All right. Well, sorry for kind of coughing through that whole thing and trying to make it. But here we are. We'll pick up next week in Genesis 32. Let's pray. Our Father, thank you for your word and just the way that you take care of your own in ways that, we might think that we understand how you're working, and you may be working something that is completely different. We may think that we are doing something, we have some kind of inside track on how to work things together according to your will, but whether or not Jacob putting the rods in the water had any effect whatsoever on the vitality of the flocks, you ultimately were the one who provided for him. Though he tried to, by escaping, protect himself from the wrath of his father-in-law, we see that you were the one that ultimately protected him in visiting him and warning him. Lord, help us to trust only in your protection, not in our own cunning, to trust in your provision, not in our own cunning, to look to you for all things, because truly you are the God who's made promises, and you're faithful to keep every promise that you've made. Oh Lord, bless us, bless my brothers and sisters until we're able to gather together again. I ask it in Jesus' name. Hey, God bless you guys.